Hi, this is Bob Costas, and you're listening to the ML Sports Platter.
The ML Sports Platter back with you all over the major platforms, Spotify, Google, and Apple, Stitcher, Deezer, wherever you get your podcasts on your smartphone device. Just look for that little podcast icon, for example, on an Apple phone. It's a purple podcast button. You tap it. And, of course, you hit search, type in ML Sports Platter, and subscribe, download, leave a 5-star review and some feedback as well. We are brought to you by our great friends at the Allen Angus Pub, Sit Means Sit Syracuse, and Empower Federal Credit Union. Log on to empowerfcu.com today. That's empowerfcu.com. Tell you what, you need to have that peace of mind, and so Empower can do that as a top-notch credit union, empowerfcu.com. Also, a big tip of the cap, just a recent announcement, Western New York OTB and Batavia Downs Gaming back with the ML Sports Platter in 2021 after a wild, weird Corona 2020 year with a horse racing kind of like, I guess we backed into the horse racing year, right? We kind of reversed the Triple Crown. No fans at a ton of the tracks, obviously. Saratoga wasn't the same. This year we're hoping is much different, right? We're trying to get out of this coronavirus thing. It looks like horse racing is pretty much on a regular calendar, and I could not be happier to have Ryan and his team back on. We're going to be talking regularly with Todd Height, the handicapper and horse racing insider. Make sure that you get to off-track betting in Western New York, westernotb.com, and all the OTBs throughout New York State. You can bet online as well. Batavia Bets, account wagering, locations, promotions, wagering guidelines, all of it at westernotb.com. Western New York OTB and Batavia Downs Gaming, a proud ML Sports Platter sponsor. Well, the book is out, major bookstores, Amazon.com, online where books are sold. Make sure you go get it. It is remarkable. 25 years ago. Is it possible? 1996 was a heck of a year in sports. A biography reliving the legend-packed, dynasty-stacked, most iconic sports year ever. And the author joins us now, John Finkel, to chat about this crazy, unbelievable time of Tiger and Gretzky and Kobe and Jordan and the Yankees and the Bulls and the Rock and Stone Cold, Muhammad Ali and the Olympics in Atlanta, Happy Gilmore, Space Jam. What a time it was in 1996. And hey, John Finkel, if we were all only 25 years younger right now doing this interview, right? How are you, man? Congrats on the book.
Yeah, thank you for having me. We'd have on our game hat and our starter jackets, and it'd be awesome.
Starter jackets. I would probably still, 96, I was 17 years old. I was in my glory as a teenager, watching my favorite teams dominate, watching my favorite coming-of-age athletes dominate. Tiger Woods, the Chicago Bulls, MJ was my guy. It was just a couple years before that. I saw 4 years, actually. MJ and the Bulls had just won 2 titles. It was just the dream team, and they came to Syracuse to play an exhibition against the Nets. The Yankees won their first World Series in 96. We had the Olympics. 1996, a biography, reliving the legend-packed, dynasty-stacked, most iconic sports year ever. I want to start with this. When do you think 96 really took off?
So when I went, I remember I was a senior in high school when 1996 was around, right? So that was a transformative year for me, graduating high school, summer, going off to college and all that.
So we're we're the same age, you and I, basically.
Yeah, we're about the same age. So when I look at it and I think back on it, obviously at the time you don't really know. I kind of refer to it in the book as like an embarrassment of sports riches as you're going through the year. And so I think for me, when the year really took off is when Shaq decided to go to the Lakers. Because around this time, if you kind of think back, for those of us listening who are around our age, like the year started with an amazing like New Year's Day bowl games where you have, Spurrier, Florida, and Bowden at Florida State, and Osborne, Nebraska, 3 giant legends, and Tommy Frazier, and all these guys basically duking it out for, at that point, team of the decade. All those 3 football teams, programs, had pretty much won almost all of the titles that year for the decade. Then you've got, like, right into the Super Bowl, the Cowboys were really the last time America's team was 96. They were going for their 3rd Super Bowl. With, they had Dion now on the team. They had Michael Irvin, Troy, and Emmett, and all those guys. And then you kind of roll right, like 2 days later, Magic Johnson made his comeback after the AIDS thing, which, his hiatus from that was such a big deal. It was transformative for us as far as that could happen, and losing him for all this time for the NBA. And then it just got rolling. You had Iverson in the NCAA tournament. You had Kobe getting, you're starting to hear about him a little bit heading into the draft. And then when Shaq gets traded, it's like, so everything's changing basically, right? Because right around then, right before then, you have a guy named Jeter debuting for the Yankees. So, he played a little bit the year before, but there was hype now. Griffey signed the biggest contract in the history of baseball at that time. So it's like everything was just fired up. And then, you were leading into the summer, which we can talk about, but you've got, the draft of Kobe and Iverson, and then the Olympics and all this other stuff going on.
What's remarkable is, some people love, not everybody. I certainly love it. I love the Mount Rushmore talk. I love the discussion of the four, no matter how you look at it, to try and figure that out. The fourth one's always the hardest, and the era, and the impact, and the greatness, and all that sort of thing. I bring up Lifetime Sports Mount Rushmore. Mine probably is Jordan, Gretzky, Woods, and probably Tom Brady at this point. But the overall sports Mount Rushmore is obviously incredibly difficult. But if you narrow it down, it's tough to not put three of the four guys on that thing had huge impact in '96. I mean, think about that, right? Like Tiger, right? Like that time, like Tiger coming on the scene and then eventually winning the Masters the year after. Tiger, Jordan, and Ali raising the torch in Atlanta. Remarkable.
Yeah, and it even gets better. You've got, the probably the most beloved for sure, whether you argue Trout or Bonds or whoever was maybe better, but for sure the most beloved baseball player of the last 40 years, Griffey, had the contract. But not only that, it was an election year. Nike did that great campaign of like Griffey in '96 running for president. He was everywhere, right? Like Griffey was all over the place. You have, arguably, again, in terms of popularity and who people rooted for, Favre comes out at the beginning of that football year. So whatever Mount Rushmore you're putting on of, popular, gritty, kind of gutty quarterbacks, Favre's on there.
Yeah.
That was the year that '96 he'd come back from rehab. Like, he was the MVP the year before, came back from rehab, obviously led them all the way in the regular season and the Super Bowl following in early '97. But '96 was his year. He was on the cover of Sports Illustrated. He was on the cover a few times. So as you kind of roll through that year and think about all the stuff that happened, Stone Cold and The Rock both made their WWF debuts that year. You can't imagine a world, where those two guys aren't around, whether in wrestling and entertainment and all that kind of stuff. Tennis, Venus, that was the first time she faced Steffi Graf. It was like her first huge time where one of the Williams sisters went on the on a main stage in Manhattan Beach Open, and that was like an incredible moment and kind of a thing of the future to kind of look at what was going to come for everything. Like you said, Dream Team 3, Agassi, probably the last tennis player, at least Americans have cared at all about, wins the Olympic gold medal after kind of having a bit of a stumbling block before that. But that was a huge moment. It's easy to make that a footnote for the year. But Agassi was a megastar, right? And then, we're leaving out the biggest, we mentioned Ali, but like Tyson fought 3 times in 1996. So it's every time you turn around and mention any big name that's affected sports in the last, let's say, 50 years, they had something going on. But to your point, of the king of the mountain of all the sports, you have Tiger. You got Gretzky going to the Rangers. You've got Jordan doing his thing, Griffey doing his thing. I mean, you could arguably say, like, maybe 6 or 8 of the top 10 athletes of the last 50 years all had big moments in 1996.
It's remarkable, there's no doubt. And you bring up Griffey, and, I grew up and still am a diehard Yankee fan. I know you're from Boston, so we'll try to keep it civil. But, Griffey was, looking back on it now, Griffey was the Michael Jordan of baseball for a short time. He was the guy. He was just do it. He was the guy jumping over the walls. He was the guy hitting bombs to the moon. He was, for a very, very short time in that Mariner uniform, John, he was, to me, as spectacular as any athlete on the baseball field. He would remind you of, right to left with the ball with Jordan, the pirouette dunking, the leaping from the foul line. I mean, Griffey did all of those things in a baseball form. He was remarkable.
Griffey is responsible for, I don't know how many millions, we'll call it tens of millions of dudes our age wearing their hat backwards. He's the reason that we wore a hat backwards. He's the reason you had, that you wanted to mimic his beautiful swing. And then I would even go a step further and say, he was the only guy. He was literally the only one who, when you looked at the smile the baseball cards, the whole thing. He was the only guy I thought who was even on par with Jordan, and I have a great scene in the book. I did, as you can probably tell, years of research, obviously having lived it, but then finding all the old magazine articles and interviewing people and finding all of the old documentaries and behind-the-scenes footage and stuff. And there was an amazing exchange that happened a little bit before 96. It was a 95 All-Star game. Jordan was there playing, he was just there visiting, but he was on actually the Barons for the White Sox at the time. And there was an awesome, I'll find it and we can link to it later, but there's an awesome video of Jordan seeking out Griffey to get him to sign a bat. And he was like, yeah, check me out. We should hang out. We should talk later. And for me watching it, I hadn't seen it. I unearthed it through some clever research reaching out.
Wow.
When I saw that, the 16 or 17-year-old me, like my mind was blown because we didn't have Twitter or any of these things where videos just show up. I had no idea that video existed, and obviously if it happened nowadays, and who knows who it would be. If LeBron was in the locker room and got Mike Trout's autograph or something, we would know about it instantly, and there'd be video and photos everywhere. But that's been buried for 25 years, and it's amazing.
No question. John Finkel with us on Twitter at John_Finkel. That's at JON_FINKEL. Make sure you give him a follow. JohnFinkel.com, the website. The book out, Amazon.com, major bookstores, and online where books are sold. 1996, a biography reliving the legend-packed dynasty stack, most iconic sports year ever. My goodness, from Griffey to Tiger to Agassi to Graf to Muhammad Ali in the Olympics, and on it goes. As we've mentioned, we'll get into some of the entertainment, some of the music, some of the Sports Center stuff, the movies. You just brought it up, though, and as we've talked here for the first, 10 minutes or so of the interview, John, all I can think about is what happens if social media arrives in 99, 95, 96-ish, somewhere in there, and all this stuff is going on, and we got Twitter, we got YouTube, we got Griffey, we got Griffey, not just as the number one highlight, jumping up, grabbing a ball over the wall, not just MJ, not just Agassi, not just Tiger Woods. I mean, what the hell happens if we've got social media during this year?
Well, I'll tell you, the moment that I think, people always talk about something will, break the internet or explode Twitter or whatever. Space Jam came out in 1996, right? So another huge kind of cultural touchstone moment. Obviously, LeBron's got a new one coming out now. But when Michael Jordan was filming Space Jam, they built basically a workout headquarters for him. It was a big they called it the bubble, before our recent bubble from the pandemic, but they called it the bubble. It had a court, it had a workout, it had a gym, it had all this stuff. And every night while Jordan was filming, every basketball player who was on the West Coast flew down there to get a run in, right? And so you've got, this is Magic, preparing for his comeback, playing there. Jordan, Reggie Miller, Charles Barkley, Patrick Ewing, all the guys who were actually playing, playing a role in the movie. They're all there. So that's one of those things where, video would be leaked. And there's none of it. They have very few. There's, scrambled video and some really small home footage and stuff like that. But there's really nothing because it was a Warner Brothers lot and they weren't really allowing anybody to film anything. But now, we probably have nightly summer highlights on Twitter or wherever it would be, showing the run at that game, what was going on and all that kind of stuff. Or they'd be live, doing Instagram live and somebody, FanDuel would sponsor it or something. Who knows?
Unbelievable. What do you hope people say about the book when they get done reading it?
Man, my number one goal is for, the target demo is like all of us, maybe plus or minus 10 years, who grew up with all these guys. But really, as I was writing it, I realized it's more than that because, the signature icons of today, the guys that the players talk about right now who they looked up to, all were impactful that year, right? Especially in basketball, you've got Kobe and Iverson, arguably two of the maybe 3 or 4 most transformative basketball players ever in terms of influence, at least the last 30 years culturally. Jordan doing his thing. They played the Seattle Supersonics that year with Kemp and Gary Payton. They kind of have created kind of new meme life with all the dunks and all that kind of stuff that people have gone through. So I want people to appreciate it and understand that, sports, it's now, but all the guys that are playing now had their favorite players, and all those favorite players they looked up to were all having awesome years in 1996. And it's just like a nostalgic trip back. And I'm sure 25 years, someone could pick another year to do. This is mine. Someone 10 years younger could be like, no, actually, 2000's the year, and it was LeBron's this and all this kind of stuff. And that's fine. It's weird writing this book on the greatest year ever, being from Boston, and Brady's not in it. And I was even thinking, how can I shoehorn him in? Did he do anything great? because he had just gotten to Michigan, so there was really nothing to write. So you're right when you said in the beginning, the sort of the main guys that aren't into this at all, and it's those guys. It's the LeBron, the younger generation, but Brady just misses getting into this book, so that hurts. But I really hope people read it, that they kind of get to take a trip back and just get to view another era, a different time. I think we viewed athletes differently back then, and then just reliving that year. I really don't think, and I did research. It's not like I just wanted to be able to defend that year as the only year. I'm sure other years have been great, and I've looked at a few. 2012 had some amazing things going on back to back. But when you look at the totality of icons who were in the spotlight, and the little flourishes like Michael Johnson, who was Usain Bolt before Usain Bolt, but he was an American athlete, so we kind of cared a little bit more, obviously, here. We had the Ali lighting the torch, which was amazing, and then the cultural stuff, which you just can't ignore. Like Jerry Maguire came out that year, right? That's
show me the money,
awesome.
Baby. Yeah.
Show me the money. All these phrases that came out. Tin Cup came out that year. Happy Gilmore, 2 of the 3 best golf movies ever came out that year. And then also, leagues started. Like the WNBA is becoming really popular. It started that year. I talked to Rebecca Lobo for the book. Like it was an exciting time that year. They launched it. They announced it. Her and Lisa Leslie and Cheryl Swoops came out, had that famous press conference. And now here we are. The WNBA is a big deal. The WNBA is a big deal. MLS had their first game that year. They finally launched that year. I mean, soccer now, we've always joked about it forever. Guys our age, it was like nobody watches, nobody plays. But the MLS is huge now. And pre-96, there was no MLS. There was no WNBA. There was no Kobe. There was no The Rock. There was no real Iverson presence. So I think it was a culturally shifting year.
You brought up Happy Gilmore and Tin Cup, obviously, and Maguire. Go through one by one those 3, because that's where I was going next anyway. It's a perfect transition. What made each of those films work, do you think?
Yeah, the Happy Gilmore, I love it. I have an 8-year-old son who we kind of, as he got past like 6 or 7, I've been letting him, Sandler's huge, right? Like you can watch Sandler at any age, but he's starting to get all the jokes. So,
but do you have to mute it when Bob Barker says The Price is Wrong? Or when Sandler says The Price is Wrong?
We live in a house where I've kind of dropped some of that kind of stuff. I don't say it often or to anybody, but he's heard those words, so I don't worry about it. He'd be like, "Why are you muting that?"
Moving on. Yeah. Yeah, because it's Sandler. I misspoke. Sandler says it right before he punches Barker.
Before he decks Bob Barker. Yeah. And actually, there's a couple lines in all of his movies where you're like, "Whoa, I forgot that was that one line," even though it's PG-13. But I'd like to say he's a mature 8, so I don't mind it so much. Right. But my point was, I watch. It's timeless. The humor is so funny. There's no. I remember listening to an interview a long time ago about, I think it was with Harold Ramis about Groundhog Day, and he was like, the reason it keeps working is because it's not tied to any time or culture. There's no technology you need to know or really references you need to know. And that's kind of what works with Happy Gilmore is, you don't need to know anything about even golf. You don't even need to know anything beyond the premise. You don't have to. There's no real inside jokes or all tons of pop culture references that you have to know at the time. It's just funny, and there's a very Three Stooges-y, which I grew up loving, humor where there's so much physical humor and Sandler yelling, and then there's so many lines that you think about, that you quote all the time. So to me, it's timeless. It's just a timeless movie, and the line that I always say, that I jokingly say, is when early on Ben Stiller's cameo, and she's, his mom's like, "Can you get me a glass of water?" He says, "I can get you a glass of shut the hell up." And I paraphrase that with my kids pretty much since they were born. And they go to bed, and it's like, "I'm thirsty. Can I have a glass of water?" And in my mind, I never said it since I was little, but I think about that in my head every time. Oh, I could, and it's 9:15, and you've been up for a half hour. And those are the kind of lines, and that's why I think it sticks with you.
Oh, man. And then Maguire and Tin Cup, was there do you think a breaking point, a moment, the takeoff for those two? Why did those work? And those are timeless, too. I mean, honestly, you go back and watch Jerry Maguire right now, you're like, wow, you look at sports through the last couple decades, man, like, here we are, Yeah,
Tin Cup is one of those that I think aged kind of like maybe 5 years after it came out. It was good in the theater. I think everybody liked it in the theater. But as it kind of grew, got on cable, had a second life of its own, and Costner he nailed it. He did a really good job in the movie. They used, Don Johnson plays a great kind of villain. And I think it's one of those where you had Renee Russo, who was also in Major League, so it was a kind of tie-in. Guys were used to seeing her as, like, the love interest in a sports movie. I think it's underrated, but whenever, Golf Digest or any of these places come out with their top, golf movies of all time, it's always, Caddyshack's sort of unassailable as number one. And then it's, Happy Gilmore and Tim Cup in Pick Your Order. And then for McGuire, I mean, people say phrases now, you had me at hello, show me the money, help me help you. Yeah. Like, they don't even know what it's from. It's almost like Casablanca in a way, where there's 25 lines from this movie that when you realize or think about it, you're like, wow, I just quoted Jerry Maguire for no reason 25 minutes later. Like, I did it, I'm sure you do. Like, you're helping your kids with homework, and they're like, I don't want to do it. And you're like, look, help me help you get this division. And you're like, I just quoted Jerry Maguire for no reason.
One thing that is, I think, John, I don't know how you feel about it, but I think about it a lot. One thing I believe that's missing in our world today, and maybe we show age a little bit by saying this, I'm sure a lot of young people don't really care because they can go to their phone a minute after and grab any highlight. You can watch anything you want on your phone. You can stream it on an app. You can go to Netflix and watch this. You can go to Hulu and watch that. You can open up your laptop and watch whatever. We live in a world where we consume our media wherever we want, whenever we want, and however we want. I get that. But there is still something to the highlight show. Da-na-na, da-na-na. There's something to Dan Patrick, Stuart Scott. There's something to, Sports Centers and Kenny Mayne and Keith Olbermann and Rich Eisen and, good, and, Booyah and all that stuff. And how unbelievable Sports Center was. How important was it for 96 and really a few years before and a few years after that while all this was going on, ESPN, they were around for almost, 2 decades at this point, but still, ESPN almost kind of became king right after, like, the explosion of the Big East and all the other things that were going on, that 90s period, early 90s, mid-90s, they became that much more of a king. They were the grand show. Everybody, that's a Sports Center moment. That we got to tune in at 11 o'clock for the full day. That was a big deal. How important was it that ESPN Sports Center, with those personalities I mentioned, that they were front and center during this time?
I think it is as critical as almost the athletes in a certain way, because that was our access to what was going on. There was no NFL package. There was no NBA package. Like, forget even Twitter and social media for a minute. I was a Celtics fan, and we moved from Boston to New Jersey my freshman year in high school, and I pretty much didn't watch Celtics games for 5 years, right? You watch 3 games a year. There was the Thursday night game, TNT, maybe you get an ABC game of the week, and my team was terrible back then, which is mostly why. But if you had no way now with the Elite Pass, you're watching everything on Sunday until the Sunday ticket came out. Again, not that anyone cares. The Patriots were terrible back then. I know now no one wants to talk about them, but I had no way of watching all the Patriots games. If we were lucky if they got a CBS afternoon game, maybe they were playing Miami was good, a rivalry or something. But you didn't get to see your team, so that's why guys like you and me, we loved Griffey. I was talking to this guy Steve Grad, he was on the show Pawn Stars. I do a section on Griffey about how important the baseball cards were in the book. And he was talking about how his, he was from Chicago. He was, big Jordan fan and all that. And, he was saying that the number one most incredible thing about Griffey's popularity is that most people, and I think he's 100% correct, barely saw him play. We grew up loving Griffey. Do you even remember a live baseball game that you watched him play? Never. Yeah. You weren't able to go on MLB, Hot Stove or, MLB. There was no MLB network. The Mariners were never on television, ever. Maybe they were playing the Yankees and got the Saturday afternoon game. So SportsCenter was the only way. The reason we knew why Griffey was so good and all the diving catches and the swing and all that stuff was because of SportsCenter. And, Stuart Scott, Dan Patrick, and Oldman, these guys were the soundtrack and the narrators of our childhood. I make a joke in the book that, the order of grown-ups that I listened to in my life were all the SportsCenter anchors, then my parents, basically. This was the background to every morning I wake up, alarm goes off for school, SportsCenter goes on. Yeah. I'm going to bed after I finish my homework, SportsCenter's on. I remember, and I'm sure you do too, you'd run it back. You'd
Of
watch
course.
the Sports Center.
Yes.
And then it'd start over because there'd be later games they put in from the West Coast, and you'd be like, oh, so, okay, I'll just do it again. You know?
Yeah, no doubt. And I think the NFL, I think all sports, obviously, and especially if you're looking for your favorite team and they win, right, like a huge game, you can never tire of watching highlights of your team winning. We know that. But the NFL today, I think, above all the other sports, is really the sport where you go, man, these highlights are endless. I've seen it. But you know what? Like, Monday comes around and you might be feeding your kid a bottle at like 5:30, and you put on NFL Network and like more highlights come up from Sunday, and then they're previewing Monday night, and you're like, yeah, well, I'll just rewatch them. And if you're in media, it doesn't hurt because maybe something said that you can use as a talking point or whatever. Well, that all started back with SportsCenter. You know what? It all started back then. The rewatching, the living through the highlight over and over again. That started then.
And they framed the story, right? So, like, one of the best examples of it in the book is, so Magic Johnson, people who are listening maybe a little younger, he got AIDS. He left basketball, which, medically now we realize he probably didn't have to. He actually got in better shape while he was gone, and started the Magic Johnson All-Stars, and ended up the whole chapter in the book. He played more basketball away from the NBA than he did in the NBA. But when he finally came back, he announces it. So, like I said, you have the Super Bowl Sunday. Then they announced that he's coming back, and his first game is going to be that next Tuesday. It's a game against the Warriors, and a game nobody would watch this game. The Warriors were okay. I mean, Harden, Chris Mullin, and Sprewell, some of these guys. But the reason that was, nowadays it'd be trending on Twitter, it'd be up, and it'd almost be oversaturated by the time Magic came back and played, right? Yeah. But the buildup of Magic's coming back, it led SportsCenter that Monday night, right? It was like Super Bowl was over, and that was the coverage, and it was the Cowboys got their third, and Barry Switzer and Troy, but Magic's coming back. Then, TNT moves their whole schedule around, puts the game on TV, but it was a West Coast game. So, how late, I don't remember watching it live. I remember maybe staying up for the intros possibly, but I wasn't up till, 2 o'clock or 1 o'clock in the morning to finish it. But the second I woke up, I watched the whole thing. So by the time we got to school the next day, I'd seen all the highlights. Dan Patrick told me what was important about it. Stu Scott mentioned why this was important and what happened in the highlights and what Sprewell said afterwards. And so without that back then, we had no access.
It was an amazing time. You're right. And then the late, that late Sports Center, you get up in the morning, you see if there was a huge game and a big recap, you knew if I hit the top of the hour, I'm getting the highlight. I'm getting what I need in 5 to 10 minutes. Today, yeah, we can go to our phone and get it, but sometimes if we're running around or whatever else, we still need a click here, a click there. Isn't it amazing, John, how with the expanded technology and how we have all of these things at our disposal, sometimes it actually isn't as easy to sometimes click and just see the highlight? Really? No. I mean, in the morning we would get up and it'd be, oh, hey, it's 6:54. Okay, I got quick. Okay, brush my teeth quick. I'm going to see the 7 a.m. Sports Center until 7:06. I'm good to go from what I missed last night. We knew it. Today, yeah, we know we can find it. We know that we can click anywhere and get it. But the reality is, sometimes we got to watch a streaming video first. Well, sometimes we got to click a link and it disappears, right? Like, it's crazy.
Yeah, and the thing, what you're talking about is what I realize is I actually miss, which is kind of like smart curation.
No
right?
doubt.
Like,
no doubt.
I love the idea, and I've actually truly, from writing this book, I have gone back to SportsCenter. I probably went, I'm going to say a decade without even acknowledging that it's on. I just know, in my mind, it's like, oh, I follow all the Celtic writers that I want, all the NBA guys that I want, all the sports people that I want to follow, and I get my stuff and I go in my stream. But I've noticed what you just said is happening a lot more, which is if everybody's posting all the same stuff, you have to sift through so many things to find out, what may or may not be going on. So I've actually recently gone back. I tape, Van Pelt, and I try to watch it in the morning, which I went. Everybody loves him, but like I'm not staying up. I get up early to work out before kids go to school and stuff. So I put that on like as I'm kind of once I get in and kind of get my breakfast and all that kind of stuff. And I've gone back to that because it's really, really difficult to stay on top of everything. And at a certain point, I don't know if it's in SportsCenter. I don't even know the anchors' names or anymore. It's not like their signature guys. I mean, back in the day, you'd know, like, oh, Tuesday it's Stu Scott and Rich Eisen. Okay,
yeah, Wednesday, it was their night. Yeah,
I knew that. Right?
Yeah, man. Yeah.
And it was funny when you were talking earlier about the time getting up. My move was always to I love when I caught it perfectly. For me, when like I knew I was going to have a good day, and again, this is such easier times in life, but like if I turned it on and caught right away the top 10 of the day, and then it rolled into the next Sports Center starting, that was great because I saw the best plays, and I was like, okay, now I know like where we're headed. And then I kind of saw it was like getting your dessert first. That to me was like, oh, if I, and you know, you never know when it would happen, but like every night you turn it on, it'd be like, you know, play 10, and I was like, oh, this is going to be the best day ever. I'm going to get all 10 highlights first.
It's such a good point. Well, you got to go get the book. Major bookstores, online where books are sold, Amazon.com, etc. It's called 1996, a biography reliving the legend-packed, dynasty-stacked, most iconic sports year ever on the 25th anniversary. Amazing that it's gone that fast. The names, the moments, incredible. Tiger, Griffey, Gretzky, the Yanks and Bulls, all the movies, Happy Gilmore and more, Space Jam, Muhammad Ali, the Olympics, the Torch, the whole deal, the Cowboys, Jeter's debut, dynasties galore. Go get it. Check him out online as well, johnfinkel.com, at John_Finkel on Twitter, at JON_FINKEL, and pick up all of his other books as well. You can go to the website. I just noticed that you wrote a book on Charlie Ward. I got to pick that up and read it. John Finkel, this was amazing. Thank you so much for jumping on. You were a terrific guest, and man, what a year it was. Thanks for coming out with the book, man.
Thank you for having me, and it's a pleasure. You're a fellow 96er. I'm glad we got to do this together.
What a blast that was. Man alive, the memories. Whew. Go get the book. John Finkel, terrific writer, terrific author. ML Sports Platter all over the major platforms. Spotify, Google, Apple, Deezer, and Stitcher, and many more. Just download, subscribe, leave feedback, and a 5-star review. We are brought to you by Bryant and Stratton College. For every end in life, Bryant and Stratton College. Great locations, of course, and 2 major ones in Central New York. James Street in Syracuse and in Liverpool. Go get your 2- and 4-year degree options now. BryantStratton.edu. We're also presented by Liverpool Physical Therapy, Hides of Liverpool, Barks and Rec Doggy Daycare, and our great, great friends over at Stanley Law Offices. Together, they'll work to get you the maximum award. Visit StanleyLawOffices.com for more information. Hit me on Twitter at Mike L. Sports. As I always tell you, enjoy the games.